Good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Brock. Welcome to our 5th Screenwriters Lecture in conjunction with Lucy Gard and the JJ Charitable Trust. I am enormously honoured to announce that our next speaker is the internationally renowned Lebanese filmmaker Nadine Labaki. Her films include Caramel, Where Do We Go Now, and the stunningly poignant Capernaum, winner of the Grand Jury Prize at the 2018 Cannes Film Festival. Nadine will give a talk, followed by a Q&A with the British Council's Director of Film, Bryony Hanson, after which we will, as we always do, open it up to questions from the floor. So, ladies and gentlemen, Nadine Labaki.
Hi. I want to start by really thanking you for being here, thanking everybody who invited me here for this great honor. You know, this is my first time I'm doing a lecture. I've never really done this before, so I don't really consider myself to be a screenwriter. I do it because I need to do it, because I want to express myself through the films I do. So I don't know if what I'm going to say is actually going to be a lecture. I'm just going to simply share my experience with you, the small experience I've had. I've done 3 films until now. I've done Caramel, Where Do We Go Now, and Capernaum. I don't know if you've seen them all. So that's what I'm going to be basically doing, sharing my experience. That it doesn't have to be the right one, but it's my way of making films, especially when you grow up in Lebanon, where there's no film industry. Back then, when I started doing my first film and dreaming about working in this field, there was no films being done. So I really learned as I went. I really learned with my first film, and I almost lured my producer into thinking that I was actually able to make a film when I didn't really know how to even write a screenplay. So it's really, I learned my craft as I started working. So I just want to start from the beginning. I'm going to be also talking about not only the screenwriting, but also the filmmaking process and the editing process, because for me, they sort of complement each other, complete each other's, because for me, it's like it's the writing process continues till the last moment. The film keeps being rewritten as we evolve into this adventure until the last moment, really. So I'm going to go back a little bit to how this whole adventure for me started in making films. I grew up in a war-torn country, Lebanon, and growing up during the war, I think you don't really have a normal childhood. We used to spend a lot of time in shelters. We used to spend a lot of time at home, with sandbags obstructing our windows. So there was boredom was a really big part of my childhood. Of course, apart from the fact that, of course, there's fear of not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow and all this anxiety, but also boredom, because we couldn't play outside, we couldn't sometimes go to school for a very long time. So I think the TV set that was right in the middle of this of the living room started becoming very important in my life, and it was a time also because of the war that there was no power most of the time. So we used to, the highlight of our day, actually for my sister and I, was the time that there was actually power and that we can actually be able to watch TV. And we used to really devour everything that was on TV, watching anything. Sometimes stupid TV series, Egyptian films, American series. I learned actually English by watching Dallas and Dynasty. Yes, I was a big fan. I remember very well how I made my first connection between the word baby that I heard from somebody talking and reading in Arabic baby. So this is how I started doing the connection between what I heard and what I read, and that's how I learned English, really. So I was the first one in class when we started English later on. Anyway, so for me, really, film started becoming a very big part of my life, very important part of my life. It really, because we were very lucky because we used to live above a video rental store, small video rental store. So we used to sneak behind the sandbags and go inside and to spend hours renting and looking at films and choosing films and sometimes renting the same films over and over again because there was no big choice during the war. And so we used to watch the same films also until, again and again, until the VHS tape was completely destroyed. And watching films like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like Grease, like Annie, I remember Back to the Future, it really allowed me to escape the reality I used to live in. Escape, like it allowed me to experiment life differently, to in a way, empathize with characters, to live different stories, to understand dance and music more, to really dream and really escape the boredom of my childhood. So when I discovered that to be able actually to create those stories that have nothing to do with my own story, in order to do that, I had to become a filmmaker. I decided very early that this is what I want to do in life. I want to become a filmmaker. I want to write stories. I want to be able to dream. I want to escape through films. And I told my father very early, I want to make films. And at that point, there was no films being done at all because of the war. Of course, the industry was completely dead. So, of course, he smiled and said, yes, because in a way, I was also realizing his dream. Because my grandfather used to have a movie theater, very humble movie theater in the village where my father was born. And I remember how my father used to tell me that he used to go to that movie theater and spend so much time in the projection room dreaming through those images that he used to see on the big screen. In a way, I sort of maybe inherited this from him, and my sister is also doing the same thing. So we've inherited this love of, storytelling and filmmaking. I don't know if I should be telling you this, but when I obviously I went to film school, and after I finished film school, I wanted to learn my craft. I wanted to see how do we learn it? But unfortunately, there was no film industry in the real sense of the term. There was no films being shot, so I couldn't really go on a set and see other filmmakers work or other filmmakers do their thing and understand the rules and how it actually functions and how the structure works and all that. So I started working in advertising. Advertising became, in a way, my lab. This is how I learned things, I experimented things. So when I really started dreaming of making my first film, I didn't know how to tackle it. I really for me, I lured my producer into thinking that, into making her believe that I can actually make a film when I really didn't know how to make a film. So I started learning as I went, and I created, I think, my own way of working. It doesn't have to be the right way, but it worked for me. It worked for me, which is a mixture between, of course, having a very solid script, but then later on working with non-professional actors, bringing people from real life, asking them to be and not to really act, because I truly believe that when you're watching somebody who's actually living that same life on the big screen, or living almost the same life on the big screen, it has a completely different impact on you as a viewer, knowing that this struggle is actually a real struggle. I think you leave the theater with a completely different impact. So I, first of all, the script writing, the screenwriting experience had to be fun for me. So I didn't want to feel like I was working. For me, I'm not a very disciplined person. So for me to be writing on my own was somehow very painful. I didn't know how to really talk to myself. So for me, it was very important that I share, that I talk, that I put those ideas out there, and that I debate with somebody else. So this ping-pong effect was very important for me. So we started writing with my friends, and it's the human connection, of course, is very important. So I started writing with one of my best friends in the beginning, and then the group started getting bigger, and so for me, it's really, writing at home is very important because it allows me to be, of course, being a mother, it allows me to be close to my children, and not feeling that I'm really working. So during the writing process, there's a lot of other things also happening, a lot of breastfeeding, a lot of diaper changing, a lot of napping time, a lot of also sharing, eating together, a lot of coffee and tea drinking. So it's not a very, no discipline is actually the word. It's not a very disciplined and structured way of working. Sometimes we spend really hours or the whole day at home just talking about something else, something that has nothing to do with the film. But I think that's, I started feeling more creative when I was actually talking about an idea, putting the idea out there and debating. And it actually allowed me to have a very direct reaction to the idea, because you have also a viewer, you have some kind of sort of a viewer in front of you, you're debating, So I think it's very important for me that I am surrounded with people when I'm working, and that we are debating about it. Later on, so I did, of course, my two first films, and actually when we started working, I didn't, like I told you, I didn't really know if we were doing things the right way. So we really invented our way of working. And when I actually had my first, the script of Caramel in my hands, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was beautiful, binded and all that. I couldn't believe that I was actually able to write 90 pages, because I think it was 90 pages, of a film. I started doing it not really believing that I was ever going to finish that film. And actually we finished it and we shot it, and it was a beautiful film that went to Cannes, and it was a very big success, and it sold all over the world. But maybe also it has to do with the fact that growing up in Lebanon, you feel like, I remember the teacher used to tell us in school, you see that very invisible dot on the map, this is Lebanon. So you feel like you're coming from a very small, invisible place. You feel like nothing, you can never really achieve anything great or anything good because you come from such a small country and you're almost invisible. You feel really invisible. So really, when you start actually achieving things, it's almost unbelievable. It almost feels like a fairy tale. So the first time we went to Cannes, it was also, you know, a very amazing memory for me, because a few years back I used to go to Cannes as just, you know, a student or a normal spectator, and I used to beg people to get an invitation to go watch a film. And Cannes is very hard, it's very harsh. So then going there with your own film and the doors being open and being considered like you're part of the family is something that is almost unbelievable until now. So then, let me see where I am in my notes. So with time, I wrote my first film, I wrote my second, and I did my first film, and I wrote my second film, and I did also, my second film was called Where Do We Go Now, and also it went to Cannes. But then with my third one, which is the most recent one, Capernaum, I started feeling the need to research. I started before writing. I started because, you know, being now in a world that where nothing is really going the right way, you feel like the right way, you feel like you're living in a chaos. And especially living in Lebanon, Lebanon being a country that, you know, now is hosting over 1.5 million Syrian refugees, and also, again, being a very small country that is already facing its own economical problems, you feel the chaos all around you. The sight of those children on the streets, either begging or working, the sight of those communities of people completely invisible, treated as if they're, you know, not there, treated as if they don't exist. Those images of those children, you know, over the internet, whether the child that, I don't know if you remember, that was found dead on the shores of Turkey a few years back, the image of those children dying from chemical weapons in Syria, or you know, hearing about the children that are being separated from their families on the Mexican border. I feel like there's a lot of things that we need to defend in a way. I felt like I can't really be silent anymore, because by being silent, I am almost part of it. I'm almost part of the crime. It's like it's one of the biggest crimes. I don't know how we're not now actually all of us on the streets manifester. What's the word? Sorry? Protesting. Yes. For it. So I felt, you know, when I saw this image of this child on the shores of Turkey, I thought, if he was able to talk, if he were to talk, what would he tell us? What would he say to the world that is actually, you know, doing this to him? What did he feel, you know, the moment he fell in the water? What were his dreams? What did he think at that moment? What did he know where he was going? Did he know what was the adventure that he was embarking on? How does this boy that is standing next to my car window, looking at me, not looking at him, how does he feel to be completely invisible? How does he feel to be completely non-existent? Because this is what we usually do, unfortunately. We tend to not look because sometimes the problem is too big. We feel like we can't do anything about it, so we choose to continue our lives. So I felt responsible in a way. I felt I can't just continue being silent. So I want to talk about this. And I was coming back home one night, and I saw another child also sitting on a cement block. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was at a traffic light, and he was just dozing off, not being able to sleep. And he was like about 1 or 1.5 years old. And I came back home, and I drew a picture of a child shouting at adults. And this actually picture became my latest film, Capernaum. It became the story of a child who was going to sue his parents for giving him life, because it was inspired by all the research that we were doing. To go back to the research process that I was talking to you about, it was very important in order to start becoming the vehicle for these children to express themselves, because this is what I felt like doing. I wanted to become their voice in a way. I wanted to be able to understand exactly what goes on in their heads, what is the behind the scenes of their life, what happens when this child disappears around the corner and I don't see him anymore. Where does he go? Who is his family? So we started this whole research process, and I knew how important this research process is, because I felt that I was not actually entitled to invent that story. I haven't been there. I haven't been in those shoes. So I'm not entitled to come up with a story. I'm not entitled to fantasize the story. I have to know what the real story is. And this is my mission, is actually to capture this and put a magnifying glass on it and in a way humanize it. Because of course we hear about it in the news and we treat it as if it was some kind of big abstract problem, but we forget to sometimes put a face on the problem. And actually I think cinema can have a much, has this bigger mission actually to humanize the problem, to put a face on the problem. It has the face of a child or of a woman or of a man struggling, and actually it can have a completely different impact on you as a human being when you know that this is an actual struggle. This is actually somebody who's having that same struggle in their real life. We started this research, going everywhere in Lebanon, going to the most unfortunate places, to the most difficult neighborhood, talking to lots of children, and also trying to understand the point of view of the parents, also talking to lots of parents, also trying to understand the point of view of justice. How does the justice system work? We spent so much time in courts, just observing how does this justice system work when it's facing a child, whether the child is there because he needs protection or because he's committed some kind of criminal act. And we saw lots of children and spoke to lots of children, and we're talking about children who are facing extreme neglect. We're not talking about any unhappy children. We're talking about children who have been abused, who've been raped, who've been tortured, children who've been beaten up a lot, children who never hear a nice word. So I just started translated those discussions that we used to have into this story, translating the way they were angry, because I used to ask them one question at the end of the conversation, which is, are you happy to be alive? And most of the times, unfortunately, the answer would be no. I'm not happy to be here. I wish I was dead. I don't know why I'm here if nobody's going to love me, if I'm going to be beaten up every day, if I'm going to be raped, if I'm going to be... Why? There's this angry why all the time. Why am I here? So I started, translating this, trying to translate it, and that's how it became the story of this child who was going to sue the world, actually, for bringing him to this life and not giving him his most fundamental rights. So during the research process, I knew that I was going to be working with non-professional actors who are not really actors, people who are living that same struggle. I knew that it was important for me to become, in a way, to create a platform through my film, to create a platform for them to express themselves. So we used to go on this research every day and come back home and, debate and remember the scenes, remember the dialogues, remember, details, small details that we used to see, and started weaving them into a story. So it's the whole story of Capernaum is actually a mixture, a mixture of everything and all the scenes that we used to see. And of course, it started with wanting to talk about a child and child labor and a child not receiving his most fundamental rights. But then slowly we understood that you can't talk about child labor without talking about paperless children. You can't talk about paperless children without talking about the absurdity of having to have a paper to prove that you exist, the absurdity of borders, without talking about the Syrian refugee crisis or the refugee crisis overall, without talking about modern slavery, without talking about human trafficking, without talking about early marriage. Everything, in a way, we understood that everything was intertwined. All the problems were so intricately related to each other. And in each family, even if some people find it sometimes that it's too much, there's too many things, we're talking about too many themes in the film, but it's actually the reality. Those things can actually happen in one single family. So understanding this, it was impossible, like I told you, not to talk about everything. So we started weaving all those themes into that story. So we had a very solid story at the end of, and based on everything we used to see at the end of those 3 years. But then working with non-professional actors, I knew that we needed also to give them the space, because they're not professional actors, it's impossible to actually impose on them a text or expect that they memorize a text and that they say it in a natural way. It was actually killing the process. So for me, it was very important to give them time, to give them space, to be able to adapt to their own personality and not really impose whatever we had written on them. So it was a sort of a choreography, a negotiation between their reality and the fiction that we had written. So the film was actually being rewritten while we were shooting. And this means really, it was a collaborative process. They are part of the writing process. And you have to be able to allow them, in a way, time was very important. This is why we shot for so long. We shot for 6 months, and we have over 500 hours of rushes. So you have to give them the time to understand what they were doing. You have to be able, in a way, to become invisible and not to paralyze them. So this means no marks. This means natural light most of the time. This means intervening the least possible. This means shooting in natural location. This means being, in a way, trying to become invisible in order for them not to feel your presence anymore. It means giving them wings by making them feel how what they have to say is important. Because, of course, in the beginning, they're very shy, they don't know, they don't know if, anyway, they're struggling in their real life to even exist. So how can whatever they have to say be important to anyone? So they feel like they're, you know, whatever they have to say is not important. So you have to create this sort of relationship for them to trust you and for them to start feeling that they have the right to actually express themselves freely. So you have to really capture their reality, and then, in a way, navigate it towards the fiction that was written. So it was an ongoing process all the time of rewriting. And it also means guiding them through the take, and letting it evolve, evolve organically. It means also having to talk also the whole time, which is very, very problematic it was a nightmare for, of course, the editors to actually take my voice out, because you have to, guide them through it the whole time. And this meant also shooting very long takes, and it meant also having an amazing crew of people that really believe in what you're doing and not doubt at any time what you're doing, because what we were doing was a little bit crazy. Sometimes we used to really shoot for hours with the cameras on their shoulders, boom operators in this position, and you have to have a crew that really believes in what you're doing in order for them to stay, to just be with you on this adventure. And I think, in a way, it also, the fact that we felt that life, art was imitating life so, I think, closely, that life started imposing itself on us in a certain way. So we had very strange things happening to us during the shoot. Like 2 days after I don't know if you've seen it. How many of you have seen Capernaum? Yes, so for the people who have seen it, there's a scene where Rahil is being captured because she doesn't have any papers. So 2 days after we shoot that scene, Rahil is captured in real life for exactly the same reasons. And so she goes through exactly almost the same situations. And the father and mother of the child that is in the film, Jonas, who is actually a girl in real life, her name is Treasure, are arrested with her at the same time. So when we were shooting those scenes with Treasure, where Treasure is without her mother, she was actually, in reality, without her mother. So in a way, you start feeling that you're actually capturing reality, and it starts also having a very big impact on you as a human being, capturing that moment. You don't know anymore what you're doing. Is this a film? Is this reality? And this kept really happening the whole time with us. And I think because we also wanted to allow it. We wanted to embrace also whatever life was going to bring our way. It meant not being afraid of just walking outside, the paved ways, in a way, walking outside the box. It meant also shooting things, not being afraid of, continuity, because the fear of continuity usually is a very big fear. And we sometimes used to, because you can't expect, especially when you're working with children, you can't expect them to do what you want them to do exactly at the time you want them to do it. So you really have to be adaptable. And sometimes we used to shoot certain scenes that were not supposed to happen at the time that we were shooting them, but because it was adequate, we used to, and then we used to take it and put it in a different scene, and we had lots of scenes that where you don't really see it, but there's a big continuity problem. They are actually wearing different clothes. They are actually, but you don't really feel it because you're so drawn into I think, what's happening in the scene that you don't really notice that they're wearing different clothes. And so you need to be, in a way, adaptable and really adapt to their own rhythm and not expect them to adapt to your way of working or to your mise en scène or a certain camera movement. So that's why I was talking about allowing also reality to take, to give us or to, in a way, to impose itself on us and life and embrace whatever happens. This is something I will talk about later, about having to take out lots of very interesting things. Actually, the first version of the film was 12 hours. Yes, and I still find it very hard now to say this is the last edit of the film. I'm still editing it in my head the whole time, and I keep waking up my husband every night and saying, what do you think? We should have done that, we should have done... And he thinks like it's a nightmare. He's also the producer of the film and the music composer of the film, and it keeps haunting me because of those very precious, real moments that unfortunately we've put a lot of them, but we couldn't put everything. So that was an example just to show you how sometimes, it doesn't have to be so structured. It doesn't have to be, we can actually shoot with the sound, with everything else going on, and just you need to really know what you're doing. That's why it's very important that you can't really improvise if you don't know what you're doing. It doesn't, you need to start from a very solid script. And actually, Eric Dolphy once said that it's like jazz. You can only improvise when you really know the music. You need a very strong foundation in order to be free. So I think that's what we used to do. It's very important that you have this very strong foundation, which is the script. You know where you're starting, where you're going, what's your story, but then within it, you're not afraid to just improvise and get out of the paved ways because you know where you're going. What else do I want to tell you? Yes, so for some people it sounds like chaos, and actually the word Capernaum means chaos. But it also means miracles. So things like that used to happen all the time. And I'll tell you about a small miracle also at the end of our talk. But small miracles used to happen like this all the time during the shoot, in the midst of all this chaos. And there's another very important ingredient when you're doing this, when you're improvising and when you're working with non-professional actors. It might sound a little bit naive, but it's actually love. Really loving your characters, being fascinated by them, by who they are, building this trust relationship. Because I'm also maybe in a way fascinated with human behavior. I'm fascinated with how we react to certain things, towards certain things, and how it feels to be in someone else's shoes. Maybe it's because I'm also bored with my own personality, because I want to explore my other natures. And I truly believe that there are other natures in every one of us. And actually, it's the only place where cinema is the only place where it's actually legal for you and legitimate for you to explore your other natures. Otherwise, in real life, you're labeled as crazy. You cannot be, reacting differently every day. So I think to a lot of people who work in this industry, who are filmmakers, screenwriters, actors, I think we love our jobs because it also allows us to get away from ourselves, to get away from maybe the boredom of our own personalities. Because we need to explore our other natures. And actually the fact that we also shot chronologically for such a long time allowed them to be able to really grasp their story and understand it and grow with it. Actually, Jonas, the treasure, her name is Treasure, the little girl, actually she made her real first steps during the shooting of the film. So the children were growing, the parents were growing, everybody, we were growing by as a crew, by everything we used to see. And it was very difficult to know that we're actually grasping real moments, we're actually shooting. Kausar lives in those slums that you see in the film. Her house is actually one of the houses, this shot where the camera goes out and up and you see all the tires on those houses and the tiles. Her house is actually one of those houses. So we used to go there, shoot in their neighborhoods, sit on their sofas, eat their food, breathe the same air, share so many things during the shoot, but then we used to go home and sleep in a warm bed. So it was actually very difficult emotionally to do that every day, to know that we're there in their reality, but then we're leaving them there. So it was very nurturing also, the whole process of spending so much time and understanding it and really living there with their problems, almost shooting in the sewers. We were shooting in the sewers because unfortunately this is the reality. And having, the voices and the cries of those children around us all the time, as if it was like a background sound of children crying the whole time that we were shooting there. So now we go to the editing phase. And the editing phase is actually the place the phase where we rewrite the film for the third time. And it's really the most difficult decision-making process, especially when you have over 500 hours of rushes and that you have like every bit of it. And that the first version, like I told you, is 12 hours. It's a nightmare when you know that the film, when you're editing, that the film can actually take so many different directions and it can take so many different structures. It doesn't have to be the way you had written it. It can be rewritten. It can have a different structure. And it's very difficult to take those decisions. And I think as filmmakers, and as screenwriters, we're lacking one very crucial element, one actually gift that is so, I think, that is usually a blessing. We don't have this gift of actually watching the film as if we're seeing it for the first time, like any normal viewer. This is something that we will never be able to achieve. And it's actually only then that you are able, as a filmmaker, to take the right decisions. And I went to so many different things. I went to crazy stuff. I actually tried hypnosis in order to try to forget the film. So I spoke to a friend of mine who does hypnosis, and I told her, can you make me forget everything about the film for only 2 hours and make me just watch this film as if I'm seeing it for the first time, like any normal viewer who's watching the film for the first time? She told me, no, you're crazy, you can't. So I really couldn't. And so what we did also, it's really difficult to take decisions when you are so, I think, when you've been diving in this adventure for such a long time, the whole process, 2 years of editing, 6 months of shooting, 3 years of research. So the whole thing took like 4 years of my life where I was working on this every single day. So it's difficult to really have the distance that you need in order to take the right decisions. So I did a lot of screenings, test screenings, where we used to listen to really everybody's opinion, take notes and listen and analyze and see why, without really interfering and trying to convince anyone of the opposite opinion. I just wanted to understand, how does a person who is seeing this film for the first time perceive it? What are the flaws? And it's very important. It helps a lot, but still, I'm still not able to say I am done. I'm not able to let go and say that's it. That's the finished product. Because I know that so many beautiful, precious moments inside those 500 hours that are not there and that maybe I will never be able to share with anyone. So you keep this you never have peace in a way when you're making a film. I think I'm not the only one. I think a lot of filmmakers go through this, and I'm sure if you ask many of them, they would tell you, yes, I wish I can re-edit my film 10 years later. So I think now I've understood that maybe in the process, maybe the next time, if I find a producer who's crazy enough to do this, maybe take a year off, like do a first edit of the film, take 6 months off, maybe even a year off, do something else, wash my eyes, work on another project, and then go back and rediscover that film, that edit with fresh eyes. I think it's the most, precious thing that can actually enlighten you as a filmmaker, where you've been diving so much in your material. I don't know what else I want to tell you. I told you about waking up in the middle of the night. Yes, I want to tell you also that, like I told you, the title of the film, Capernaum, means chaos and miracles. And I told you that miracles kept happening the whole time. And now, when I look at Zayn's smile at the end of the film, it has a completely different meaning for me, because now Zayn, who's been living almost the same circumstances, has a Norwegian passport now. He's been resettled in Norway. He's living a completely different life. He's going to school. He's regained his childhood. And life keeps reminding me in a way that I don't know what it is, but in the film, Zayn used to dream of going to Sweden. Now he's in Norway. In the film, Rahil and her son get deported. They are now back. They were deported, and they are now in Kenya. In the film, I don't remember what else, but reality keeps, haunting us in a way and reminding us that what we were doing was not actually just another film. And that's it. And I think another miracle is actually me standing here giving a lecture about my film. Being among all those amazing, filmmakers and screenwriters is actually, yes, another miracle. So thank you for listening to me. I don't know if I was I don't know if I was too long.
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to fundamentally disagree with two things that you said. One is that you are not a screenwriter, and the other is that you're not a lecturer, because you're clearly both of those things. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I've got so much I want to ask you about, and I know that lots of people will have too, so we'll get straight on with it. Just explain to us, with this last film, was there ever a point when you had an actual script?
Yes, of course.
Before you started, and
Yes,
then
yes,
you
absolutely.
just stole things as you went along.
Yes, absolutely. There was a very, very solid script. And I think you can't really expect to improvise, not knowing where you're going and really succeed in doing that. It's very difficult. It's only when you really know your material very, very well that you allow yourself to improvise, because it's not scary anymore. You know where you're going. You know what you're going to keep from that, what is good, what is actually adding some kind of value to what you've written, and what you don't really need in what you want to say, because you know what the scene has to tell. You know where you're starting, where it needs to land, and what the scene needs to tell as a story. You know what you want. So it's actually not scary anymore to improvise, because you know what you will keep and what you will not keep. And it's actually also nurturing, because it's very, for me at least, I'm not saying this, it doesn't apply to other filmmakers, of course, but for me, it's more challenging that way. I'm not interested in just sticking to what I had written, because I need to, in a way, discover things and be surprised. And this surprise element keeps you going, gives you so much adrenaline when you're working, and when you're actually thinking, that was a real moment. This is not something I've written or imagined or fantasized about. This is a reality, especially when you're trying to make a film that is, in a way, the closest possible to reality. And it's the biggest compliment for me when people tell me, I thought I was looking at a documentary, but then I understood it was a fiction. Because this is what I wanted to achieve. Really, because I think cinema can have a much bigger impact on you as a viewer, when you're really thinking that this is an actual struggle, and you're really not thinking it, it's actually feeling it. You know that this is Zain's life when you're watching it. You know that this is Rahil's life when you're watching it. You know it's not make-believe.
Can you imagine, now you've had this experience, which must have been really different from the experiences on the other two films, can you imagine going back to a more conventional sort of sitting down with a blank piece of paper and starting from scratch? Or will you always now have an element of this in the work?
I think, yes. I think in a way, when you go this path, it's difficult to go back. It's difficult to, unless, it's a complete, fantasy, or a film that is I don't know, something that is very, very décalé from real life or different from real life, then yes. But if I want to continue doing that kind of cinema, it's difficult. At least I know now how precious research is, how precious and how confidence it gives you, how much confidence it gives you when you're actually knowing that this is actually what you're saying is true. It's not, you're not inventing a story. You're not. I'm not saying this doesn't apply to all schools of filmmaking. It really applies to this kind of filmmaking that I am into right now. It doesn't mean that other kinds of films that are, completely fantasized are not great. There's masterpieces like that. But for now, I think I'm interested in that. I don't know how long I will keep doing it. Maybe one day I will shift completely. But I'm interested in reflecting reality. I'm interested in telling real stories. I'm interested in showing real struggles, because I think it's not even a choice for me in a way. It's a duty. I don't know why I feel this. Maybe living in Lebanon and growing up in Lebanon in such a difficult, complicated country where nothing is going the way it should. Sometimes I feel like it's a cursed region. I mean, that's why also the film is called Capernaum. Capernaum is a cursed village that was cursed by Jesus, and there used to be a lot of miracles happening there. So it's a mixture between curse and chaos and miracles. So I feel the responsibility of being an artist living in Lebanon. You feel like it's a duty to use your tool to actually make some kind of change, or at least if you can't achieve change, at least trigger debate. It's not a choice for me. I need to do that. I feel it. I feel that mission for now.
You feel it for now. You didn't always feel that, did you?
No.
When you set out to make Capernaum,
Of course,
that
yes.
was you.
It grows.
It feels like everyone else.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's something that comes with age, with maturity, with motherhood, with becoming, feeling, or wanting to be more politically engaged or socially engaged. This comes with time. It comes with maturity. I didn't know what I was doing when I was making my first film. I didn't know it really worked for me. I was learning really my craft while I was making my first film. So you don't, now I know that I need time when I'm working on a film to be able really to draw these kinds of performances from non-professional actors and children, or I need this organized chaos. This organized chaos actually, I don't know, gives me adrenaline, charges me with something. I cannot do things that are very structured. I cannot be paralyzed in the classical way of making films. I don't know why, in a way it scares me, it kills me.
Do you think you could have done this had you not had those earlier experiences of a more conventional?
No, absolutely not. I needed those other experiences to learn what works for me. It doesn't mean that I love my other two films, but it was a completely different, had a completely different personality even. I changed. For me, there was a before and after Capernaum for me. I changed humanly. I mean, I changed. Even physically, I changed. It was so challenging. It was so yeah.
You talked a little bit about, I mean, you talked a lot about being a writer, you talked a lot about being a director, a little bit about being a producer as well.
Yes.
The other bit of your kind of hybrid, and which makes you a little bit unusual in this series, is that you're also an actor. And that's how you started. Do you think that has made you a different kind of writer?
Absolutely. I think the fact that you know actors well because you are also in the shoes of an actor a lot of times. I think you know what an actor needs, you know how an actor expects to be directed, you know what an actor expects also from a script he's reading. I think it enriches you on so many levels, everything, being a director, an actor, producer, writer. I think for me, I can't really divide myself. For me, I'm just all of those things together. And it really makes me see this whole thing from so many different perspectives. And it informs each job actually informs the other one in a positive way. And also being a director, I work differently also with actors because I was also an actor. So the relationship between the director and actor becomes much more strong when you know what the actor needs from a director and what the director needs from an actor. And being both of them, you know. And it actually, I think, creates a much better relationship for me as an actor with any director, because I understand the director. I know what he feels. I know his sort of fragility. I don't know if you know. I know when to talk to a director, when not to talk, when to propose something, when not to propose, when to shake his in a way, his confidence, when not to do it. You really become very delicate in that way.
And when you were writing, presumably for the first two films, you knew the part you were writing was going to be taken by you.
Yes.
Does that make you write it in a different way? I mean,
I don't actually, when I think about it, I don't enjoy it very well because I'm afraid.
The writing or
the writing for myself, because I'm always afraid to challenge myself as an actor. I don't have enough confidence to challenge myself as an actor, or to say I'm gonna, give myself a very challenging part and really explore my other natures the way I really want to explore them, because I don't have enough confidence. I didn't start as an actor. I started as a filmmaker, and then I started acting in my own films because I felt the need to do it. I felt close to those characters, so I did it. But I don't write challenging parts for myself because I'm afraid. And in this one, I was in Capernaum. Actually, I was the most afraid, and the part was much more written than this, and we shot those scenes with the lawyer. In the film, you understand where she's coming from, why she's defending Zayn, what is her story, what is her struggle. You go to her house, you understand her pain and all that. But then when I started editing the film, I felt that I was the only lie in the film. I was the only person that was an actor. I was not a lawyer in real life. So it was a sort of a small lie. That's why we took everything out. And we kept those small scenes. You barely see me for 1 minute in the film. We kept those small scenes just to understand how Zayn was able to actually file a complaint and stand in front of a judge. So for me, it's very difficult. As much as I love acting, it's very difficult to write interesting characters for myself. I don't know if I will ever be able to do it, but I'd love to, because I've never really experienced that amazing relationship between an actor and director, where you really dig into your personality and you challenge yourself and you explore those other natures that are inside. You know that they're inside, but you don't know how to. You're afraid to let them out, and you really need the love and the desire of somebody else to actually be able to let them out.
And could you ever imagine writing for somebody else?
Writing
for somebody else to direct? Or is it all just...
Writing for somebody else to direct? No, I can't. I can't really let go. No, it's impossible. No, I don't imagine myself doing it.
It's interesting, though, because your first two films particularly, I mean, a lot of the reception of those two films was around the genre, how you treated genre, particularly that these were, I think, Caramel, they described as an international rom-com. Somebody, I was reading a great review this morning which said that it was Steel Magnolias without the terminal illness. But a lot of that is quite a conventional way of, pulling apart a subject and putting it back together again. Do you really not think you could do that for somebody else, or are you just not interested in doing that for somebody else?
I've never really thought about it. I think I'm too jealous in a way. Not jealous, but yes, I'm too possessive over, I don't know, what I write and what I do, that it's difficult to just let go and say, you can do it. I've never thought about it. It's a very good question.
Okay. Somebody will ask. And the other thing, I know we've only got a few minutes left, actually, so I'm going to go to questions very shortly. But just let me just ask, do you think there is still a through line between your various different films? I mean, the three could not be more different, I don't think. The subjects, the way that you have put them together, and the way they've come out. Do you see a clear sort of, is there a your personality in all three of your films? Do you still see that?
Yes, absolutely. I think the relationship to actors, this way of directing actors, this way of working almost all the time with non-professional actors, because I did this with Caramel. Also, almost all of them were non-professional actors except the policeman. I think, yes. And where do we go now? Also, there were maybe 2 or 3 actors in the film, but the rest were non-professional actors. Also, that relationship with actors, you feel it. This way of draw. That's my strongest, my favorite point. My favorite thing about filmmaking, actually, is really drawing great performances out of people who have never acted in their lives, and really having this kind of fascination towards their personalities in real life. And it shows, really. It showed that there's a fascination, because the way we shoot them the whole time, the way we in a way magnify their personality, you can really see it. You can really feel it. It's like this secret code that I have with my actors. This is something I think that shows in all of the films, I guess. And also maybe, the humor part, finding humor in the most difficult situations, in the most absurd situations, also is something that I like doing. I don't know actually if when you see Caramel and when you see Capernaum, you say, I know it's the same person doing those two films. I don't know. I think Capernaum is very, very different in the way, it's harsher, it's less, but I don't know if you really see through it and you see me in all of them as a normal viewer that doesn't know.
Mm. I think also the interest that you previously have had in telling stories about women, particularly in the first two films, and then you've moved slightly to the side of that. Is that a kind of, did you consciously set out to make films about women in the first place, and then you have moved away? Or
no.
Is that just an accident?
No, not at all. I think it was natural for me in the first film because I was also, trying to understand women in my country, trying to understand the contradiction that I used to see all the time, contradiction between what those women actually allowed themselves to be when they had different dreams, the contradiction between who you end up becoming and what you wanted to become, and trying to understand why is there so much contradiction, why aren't we able to actually be who we want to be, of course because of social pressure, because so many different reasons. I just decided to talk about this because I felt the need to talk about it. I felt the need to understand through those examples of different women coming from different backgrounds, different educations, different stories, different experiences, as if I was drawing, it's not really a résumé, it's not really a summary of all the women, of all women, but it was, seeing it from different perspectives and trying to understand women from different ages and all that, because I needed to understand also. I was looking around me, actually, it was at a point where I was looking around me at women, and I felt sadness in most of the women I knew. There was a sort of sadness in their eyes. I never had encountered a woman that was actually completely fulfilled or fulfilling herself. I was actually looking for a role model, and I couldn't find it. And I started asking myself the question. That's why I started working on this film. And the same thing for Where Do We Go Now? It was actually also a time where I was pregnant with my first baby, and conflicts erupted in Lebanon, and there were conflicts that erupted over a period, a very short period of time, like 3 hours or 4 hours, and all of a sudden, Beirut was actually on the verge of a new civil war. Lebanon was actually on the verge of a new civil war. So I felt, at that time, what would I do as a mother to stop my son from taking a weapon and going down the streets and killing somebody else's, another woman's son? What would I do as a mother? And that's how it started. It became the story of those women who were going to stop their men from fighting. So it actually always comes from a need, in a way, a need to express something, a need to, or something that becomes an obsession, something that is always on your mind, you're always thinking about it, and then you express it and you turn it into a film. This is what I know. That's my tool, and it was the same thing for this film. It was really the need to just stop being silent. I felt the duty to just talk about this problem And because it's a really, and we're not talking about hundreds of children or thousands of children, we're talking about millions of children across the world that are deprived from their most basic rights. And that was the ignition point. Of course, then later I spoke about many different themes, but the igniting point was really this. There's over 280 million children across the world that work, that don't go to school, that are living in unbearable conditions. Those children are growing up angry, they're growing up numb most of the time. I saw kids that don't react anymore. They've been in such a state of shock, they don't do anything. They don't laugh, they don't cry, they don't dance, they don't play, they don't do anything. They've been so traumatized, so beaten up, so raped, so abused that they are numb. Those children growing up numb, we have to just be aware of the problem that we're going to face in a few years, where this is going to explode in our faces one day. So I just felt the need to talk about it. As simple as that. It doesn't come from analyzing. Oh, now I'm going to talk about women. Now I'm going.
Glad you did. Okay, we've got time for just a couple of questions, I'm afraid. Pop your hands up. One down here.
Hello.
And then one down here.
Thank you very much for your lecture. Thank you very much for your lecture, Nadine. I just wanted to ask you how the actors felt about the characters that you had created. They're obviously very, very close to their reality. But when you think, for example, the woman who played Swad, it's a pretty tough mirror of motherhood that you put in front of her. Did she express the need to not do certain things or change the character? What was their relationship? Or even little Zayn, like all these beautiful swear words that he uses through the film, did it come naturally from him? How much comes from you? Just trying to understand that dynamic.
I think the fact that they felt that they were part of a mission allowed them to really do everything they were doing in the film. Kawsar Suad, the mother of Zayn, actually felt the need to express it because this is something that she sees around her. She was actually inspired by someone in her family. Everything that she was doing was inspired by someone in her family. So she felt the need to express it because she felt she was part of that mission. Everybody that was in the film was actually collaborating in that mission. Zayn was doing the same thing. Zayn felt that he was being the voice of those voiceless kids that he used to meet every day or see every day struggle, because Zayn is coming from the same background. Zayn used to, he never went to school. He's a Syrian refugee. He's been living in Lebanon under very, very difficult circumstances in a very dangerous neighborhood. So he used to struggle every day to survive, getting into fights. Those swear words are his own swear words. This is the way he talks. This is his personality. And it was very important for me to keep them and to keep his personality, because this was one of the most, I think, important signs of the violence he used to go through. That's where you know what this kid has gone through. It's by the language that he uses, and this is nothing compared to Zayn's language. It's nothing. When you hear Zayn, when you hear him getting into a fight and fighting with his friends, you say, how does he learn? Where did he learn those things? What did this child see to be able to express himself this way? So this was very important to keep it, because this is, instead of showing him getting into a fight, you just keep everything the way it is, and you understand everything, and you understand everything that he's been through. And he felt he was part of a mission. When he's talking about, when he calls the TV show and he says, life is worse than the shoe I'm wearing. I've never heard a nice, what am I going to remember? The hose or the chains or the... He was actually talking about things that he had seen, talking about children that he had seen getting beaten up. He actually, when he's talking about Alia, when he's saying to his sister, do you know Alia, your friend? Her mother put her in the house until that pig came. He's actually talking about a real Alia that he knows. So he felt he was part of the mission, So we were all in it together. Nobody felt like it was something imposed on them or they're doing something that they don't want to do. They know that they need to be, for things, for their life to change, they need to talk about it. And they were collaborating in the process.
Hello, Nadine. First of all, I watched the film Capernaum, and it's amazing. And I can tell you, like, I watched all your films. First of all, I'm Lebanese as well. So,
it shows.
So Capernaum is different than the first two in so many ways. My curiosity here lies by you being a filmmaker, you want to do the casting. How were you able, like, I know you took them from real situations, but how were you able to say that Zayn is Zayn? He is perfect for this role, and this one is perfect for this role. Did you do a normal casting? Were you able, how did you cast them? And something else, the last thing in the film, when Zayn is talking on the phone and he's telling this whole speech that you're talking about, was it improvised or was it written? Because he delivered, I think, the best performance in the film, in that speech in particular.
Okay, so for the first question, the casting was like a wild street casting. So I had an amazing crew of 5 to 6 people that used to go everywhere in Lebanon to very, difficult neighborhoods and interview children and their parents and just we never, you don't expect them to come to audition. You have to go to them. So that's how it happened. And Zayn was actually playing on the streets with his friends. He was feeding the chickens, and the casting director saw him and she interviewed him. And when I saw him, actually there was another story, a nice story. I don't know if we have some time to tell it. When, remember when I told you when I came back home and I drew that picture, when I saw this kid trying to sleep, and I drew this picture of this child that is shouting at adults, and he has his mouth wide open and he's shouting. When I compare this drawing to Zayn's picture, it was actually Zayn 4 years before I met him. So it's something that tells you everything he is, actually. The fact that it was actually, when you see, I forgot this actually, I wanted to read to you the description of Zayn, and I forgot it, the description of Zayn in the script. He is described exactly the same way, that he has to be smaller than his age because of malnutrition. He has to have those eyes, those sad eyes that show you that, he's been a witness to so many things. This wisdom in his personality because he's lost his child and he's seen so many things that he's not a child anymore. Everything in the description was actually, when we saw Zayn, it was Zayn. And it was obvious that, it took me like the second answer he gave her, I knew that it was him. And I never, doubted it. And it was like this for almost everyone in the film. It's something in you, like love at first sight. It's like a fascination for their character in their real life that tells you you're on the right path. Even if sometimes you have doubts and it's difficult and you don't know. The first day of the shoot with the parents, with Zayn's parents, I thought, what have I done? This is a complete failure. But then, I don't know, like a miracle the next day, because you give them the strength and you talk and you explain why, and you give them wings and they start feeling, because a few days before being on set, they were actually struggling to prove they even exist. None of them have papers legally. Not only emotionally they don't exist, but even legally they don't exist. So all of a sudden they are here, they feel important. What they have to say actually counts for somebody. And it gave them wings. And the next day it was, I don't know, another miracle. I couldn't believe what they were able to do. And what was the other question?
The last speech that
yes.
delivered.
No, it was written, but it was also very adapted to his words. So that's what we used to do all the time. So, of course, you guide him into saying things in the way, towards what you want. But he also uses his own words. So it's a mixture between what was written and a few words that he added. It's always like that.
We were talking before we came out here tonight this afternoon about how this series tells you that there's kind of a million ways to make a movie, and I'm so glad that we got to hear about the way that you make them. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us.
Thank you.